Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to MST.TV. This is Nishi here bringing you all another Market Watch episode. So the release of Rise of the Duelist has sparked a ton of life back into the market, introducing really key meta warping cards into the game. 2020 has been a bit of a hectic year thus far between Secret Slayers and Rise of the Duelist and Toon Chaos. Yu-Gi-Oh has done a complete 180 from where it was at this time last year, and we still have more changes coming up ahead with the releases of the 2020 Megatins and Maximum Gold later this year. So today we are going to do our best to make sure that you guys are as up to date with all of your card prices as possible so that you can be ready for what's ahead. Let's get started. Kicking things off, let's take a look at some of the key cards out of Rise of the Duelist. At the top of the set we have Forbidden Droplet, which is the quick play spell card that has a very similar effect to Dark Ruler No More, but it's chainable, which is obviously really huge. It does have a fairly significant cost, requiring you to send other cards to the graveyard in order to activate it, but it is incredibly relevant in today's meta nonetheless, being able to shut off cards like Borreload Savage Dragon and Appaloosa. Now because of this, we are seeing it sit atop the set at a whopping $90 a piece, which honestly isn't that surprising given how much meta play it is seeing. It was played in a ton of different main and side decks at the LCS tournament from over the weekend, so it went from being around a $60 to $70 card before the release to now being a $90 card. Now if you were able to pick them up early on, maybe before the set released, then congrats, you probably got a really good deal on them. I know I personally was able to pick up 4 copies for about $54 US each, which was really great. I do think that this card is going to remain pretty steady and high in terms of price because of its relevance in the meta. It kind of single-handedly shuts down the Numeron engine and Utopic Zexal, and it becomes even more meta relevant when Red Eyes Dragoon comes out in the 2020 Megatins. It is possible that the lack of events will push this card's price down a bit towards the $80 mark, but I don't really see it dropping much lower than that. Look at a card like Lightning Storm, which a lot of people see as being a competitive staple in the side deck, which is still sitting at well over $100 a piece. Obviously, you can choose to play an alternative like Forbidden Chalice or Infinite Impermanence, but the reality is that if you want the flexibility and versatility of Forbidden Droplet for over the next year or so, you're going to have to pay a pretty hefty price tag. Now, kind of the opposite of Forbidden Droplet, we have Triple Tactics Talent, which was probably more hyped up than Forbidden Droplet early on, but is actually something that we're seeing a lot of people have really mixed opinions about. I've heard different people say different things on the card, some swearing that it's going to be a meta staple, and others saying that the card is just bad. The results that we've seen from tournaments and whatnot have been varied as well. At different points over the last couple of months in the OCG, we've seen it played at 3 and everything at first, then at 0, and now people are just running 2 copies of it if they're playing it. Here in the TCG at the LCS from over the weekend, I think that surprisingly few people actually played Talent in their lists, which was pretty interesting to see. To be fair, the TCG and OCG have entirely different metas and different paces, so who knows exactly what's going to happen moving forward. Personally, I think it will see a bit of play in a slower strategy like Dogmatika Invoked, where you can use it to potentially draw into multiple hand traps or control the game a little bit better, as opposed to combo decks where it doesn't actually enable you to play through a negation and you might rather have something like Called by the Grave. Another factor I think is something like Max C being unbanned in the OCG, because if say your opponent shotguns Max C in the standby phase, you could talent and then draw 2 cards or rip a card from your opponent's hand, and that is a fairly significant swinging card advantage. I do think that this card is not going to see play in absolutely everything, so I am expecting its price to dip to around the $50 mark. Personally, I am not picking up any myself at the moment. This card was more hyped up on release, closer to the $70 to $75 mark, but since then it has trended downwards and it's now at between $60 to $65. I think it will continue to trend down unless out of nowhere it starts to see a huge surge in play. Okay, so next up, Nadir Servant is a card that everyone recognized was undervalued when the set was first released, but not very many people took action with that information. This is obviously a 3 of if you're using the Dogmatika engine, allowing you to search for Ecclesia, which fetches you another card, and allowing you to dump a card like Antis or Apkallone into the graveyard for free and proc its effect. For whatever reason, this card was only $50 or so when Rise of the Duelist was first released, but after people realized just how viable the Dogmatika engine really is, it has jumped up in price to anywhere from $65 to $70 a piece. It is definitely one of the most important pieces of the Dogmatika engine, alongside Ecclesia, which is a really expensive ultra rare at almost $26 a piece. At the LCS, we saw a ton of people playing Dogmatika, and in a ton of different decks too, not just with the Invoked, but also with things like Synchro Eldritch as well, which was really cool to see. This honestly feels like the new Sky Striker engine of 2020, where it's just being splashed into so many different decks and strategies because of the easily abusable utility that it provides. Even if Dogmatika Invoked isn't a top tier deck, or if the Invoked engine were to get hit in some way, I am absolutely expecting the Dogmatika cards to continue to be a relevant part of the meta moving forward, seeing play in various strategies, so I don't believe that either Nadir Servant or Ecclesia are going to drop in price anytime soon. I do think that we will probably see Fleur-de-Lis and Maximus drop to around $20 and $15 respectively, just because they aren't the key 3-ofs that Nadir or Ecclesia are, but the engine remains as one of the most splashable compact engines available in the game at the moment. So we're on to kind of an odd one here. We have Ignoble Knight of High Launsalon. This is a level 5 synchro monster that requires the non-tuner to be a Noble Knight, so not really generic. On Synchro Summon, it allows you to equip a Noble Arms card from your deck to this card. It also allows you to search for a Noble Knight or a Noble Arms card at the end of the battle phase if this card destroys a monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard. The second effect isn't really that relevant, but the first effect means that you can search Durendal out of the deck, which can then pop itself in order to search for another card, so maybe this is a potentially useful piece to help you unbrick. However, what's confusing to me is that I haven't actually seen this card in very many Infernoble Knight deck lists that I've looked at. The extra deck space is already pretty tight, so I don't know if it's really worth running. Even in the build that took a top spot at the LCS over the weekend, I don't think this card was used there either. However, the card has seen a significant price jump as the card only has 2 relatively old printings. The original secret rares from Shadow Specters are $20 for the Unlimited and $30 for the first edition, and even the really ugly platinum rares from the Noble Knight box are $10 each, which is definitely a bit much in my opinion. I think that even though this card is maybe good in theory, it's not really worth running, so I do think that its price is going to tank back down over the next little while as more and more results from events are revealed and this card continues to not see any play. Alright guys, so this one I blame Tombox for. Light Imprisoning Mirror is a card that has caught a fair amount of attention over the last few days. Notably, Light Imprisoning Mirror is a great card when playing against Dogmatika Invoked, as it shuts off a number of their key cards, including Ecclesia, Mechaba, and Elder Entity Entis. This can of course make it harder for the deck to operate, especially without some sort of back row removal like Twin Twisters or Cosmic Cyclone. In my opinion, I don't really think that this card is worth a side deck slot unless your deck really struggles to play against Dogmatika Invoked. We're actually entering a really diverse format right now, with Eldritch Emancipators, Dogmatika Invoked, Dragon Link, Subterror, and Infernoble Knights all being incredibly viable decks. So I would think that I'd want to side something that's good for multiple matchups, not something that's gonna hard counter a specific one. This hasn't stopped people from buying out the harder to find versions of the card, as DT Light Mirrors are now $6 to $7 each, and the Duelist League colored rares are $4 each, and both have quite limited quantities available on the market. The card does have a couple of common printings available, so the card should still be readily available, and oddly enough, this card has never seen a holo printing, despite seeing play on and off for over the last decade or so. I think that if you can find someone who is willing to overpay for this card, it's probably a good idea to dump it while it's hyped up, because I firmly believe that there are more generic side deck cards that will make better options given the way that the format is shaping up. Next up, let's touch on Dragunity Knight Romulus for a second here. So I know that a bunch of people are looking at picking up Romulus as an investment because of all the success that Dragon Link is seeing, and with Dragunity support coming out in the form of a structure deck either late this year or early in 2021. Apparently, however, Romulus was leaked in a Konami video, and the card was revealed to be a prismatic secret rare in the 2020 Megatins, and so you should absolutely not be investing in this card at the moment. I do actually think that this leak kind of went under the radar because I didn't hear about it until yesterday, and apparently the leak was a few days ago, so that's really interesting. I think Romulus isn't a horrible card to invest in after the Megatins come out, and the card drops down to being $1 or so, because even before the reprint it was only about a $5 card. It also largely depends on just how amazing the Dragunity deck is, since it did get a couple of really useful cards in the new Blizzard Phalanx kind of hybrid that is a jump promo, as well as the new Counter Trap. But yeah, for now, Romulus is 100% a card that I would be trying to offload now before the reprint tanks its value. So I mentioned this card in Market Watch about a month ago, and back then it was only a $20 to $22 card. Well, Predaplant, Verte, Anaconda is now up to $25 a piece, and while this may seem like a relatively insignificant price jump, I think it's very much indicative of what's to come in the 2020 Megatins with the release of Red Eyes Dragoon to the TCG. I've seen some people talking about how they think that Verte Anaconda is at its peak right now and it's not going to go much higher, but I do think that it has another price spike coming when the Megatins officially do come out here. Yu-Gi-Oh players in general, I feel like, don't really look too far ahead. Rather, they wait for 100% confirmation by tournament results, or for when a certain card officially comes out here before actually going and picking up a certain card. For instance, Nadir Servant is a card that we knew was going to be an important 3 of in a very meta-relevant engine, but the early prices of it were quite low until it was validated by tournament results. I think that the peak of this card is between $35 and $40, which we will see if the Dragoon engine is as strong as I'm expecting it to be. Remember, it single-handedly warped the format on its debut for several months over in the OCG. I'm not saying that you have to go and pick up like a dozen copies of this card as an investment, but rather I'm just reminding you that if you don't have your copy already, it's something you're absolutely going to want to grab within the next couple of weeks before it does have that price spike up once again. And finally guys, let's talk a little bit about the 2 big key cards from the Secret Slayers set, Eldritch the Golden Lord and Adamantipator Researcher. So it feels like not too long ago that Researcher was $70 and Eldritch was approaching $200. In fact, Eldritch saw a buyout a couple of weeks ago and it hit $180 or something crazy like that. And we're actually still continuing to see these 2 decks as top decks of the format, with each of them taking multiple top spots at the LCS online tournament from over the weekend. Despite this though, we're actually seeing the prices of these 2 very important cards from the decks drop in value or stay relatively steady over the last couple of weeks. They aren't increasing despite the competitive success that the decks are seeing, and I think this is largely because of the diversity of decks that we're seeing in this upcoming format relative to what we had a few months ago. When Secret Slayers first dropped, it took over a really big chunk of the meta, and it felt like most of the tops that we saw were from one of the 2 decks, either Adamantipator or Eldritch, and if you wanted to win, you probably had to play one of those 2 options. Now, however, the format is incredibly diverse and open, and there are just so many different decks that you can play and see competitive success with. Because of this, there are now less Adamantipator players or less Eldritch players, as people turn to other viable decks, despite Adamantipator's and Eldritch being just as strong and relevant as they were before. If people are wanting to pick up the newest, hottest strategy, a lot of the time they're going to have to sell off their old decks to have the money to purchase a new deck, and if too many people do this, the increase in quantity on the market will drive the prices down. I do think that over the next couple of months, if we continue to see Infernoble Knights and Dogmatika Invoke do well, we'll actually start to see Eldritch and Researchers' prices drop a little bit more over time as people switch over to their decks of choice. Alright everyone, that is it for today's episode. Rise of the Duelist was an absolute game changer. I think that we're going to continue to see the set's influence on the market over the next couple of weeks as people try out new techs and strategies combined with the new cards that we got. And then of course we have the Megatins coming out at the end of this month, something I am super excited for. I think I ordered like 8 cases or something, so I'm going to have a ton of fun cracking those open. I'm really excited to see just what the world premiere cards are and what other cool imports we hopefully got, something like Crossout Designator. Anyways guys, if you enjoyed today's Market Watch episode, please be sure to hit that thumbs up button for me and let me know that you enjoyed it. Also, make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below. Let me know what else is going on with the market that maybe I didn't cover in today's episode or that you guys want to know about, so I can maybe go over it in a future episode. And of course, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button to get all of the latest and greatest content from both Tombox and myself here on the channel. And yeah, so until next time guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.